Hello everyone. Today I'd like to share with you how I've learned to learn new languages over the years. And the methodology I use is called Just Deep Enough, or JDE. Not Jedi, that's something to do with Star Wars. Okay, the whole purpose of the way I learn languages is kind of a scalable thing. It allows you to learn the most important stuff first so that you can get in there and you can change somebody's legacy code that they bagged you with. Then afterwards, when you're basking in your victory, you could sit there and have a cup of coffee and go back and learn some other features that you thought were interesting, but you didn't have time enough to deal with. Okay, the method is you have a study guide there below you, and I have blanks available. It's got all the stuff taken out of the comments. The topics come up in about the order that they'll come up as you learn a new language. You can see download is the first thing. Most of the thing that happens with a new language is you download it first. Anyway, I'll cover each of those in a little more detail here in a minute. The features refer to the feature of that language that are relevant to the topic. For example, when I talk about structures, some languages have hashes. Some call them pairs. Some have arrays. Some of them have lists, and a lot of them have classes, as in classes with methods and fields. The reference you could use for the URLs that you find helpful, and the comments column is for everything else. Now, what I will use it for is to give you an idea of the depth that we cover the language in this course. Now, looking at the first page, the download is the official download site. You can download from secondary sites, but the URLs might not be updated, and it's generally best to get source information from the primary source. Now, this little thing about in scope for class, I feel like asking you questions about how to download the programs we use in this class are fair game. Okay, official reference site. This is the statement of what the language is by the people who wrote it. And again, primary sources are important. And what I found out is something like Stack Overflow is nice if you want to do a particular thing really quickly, but if you have to dig a little bit, then you need to go to the primary site. You need to look up the syntax. You need to see what all the switches and all the whereas and wherefores are. Okay, created by is the author and the date. Date is in quotes because generally the language doesn't spring to life overnight, that it's over a year or two. Philosophy, the idea is if you know the intent of a language, you'll understand the language better. And the programming aids are kind of the tools of trade. Some of them have their own little program to use, like Racket has Dr. Racket. You can use Visual Studio Code for PowerShell and a number of other items. Okay, going down to language particular features, you have comments. The first thing I learned how to do in a language is to do a comment, because I comment in my program structure first, and then I go back and I program to it. Grouping code. A lot of languages use curly braces to group code. Python uses indentation to give you an example of language that doesn't use curly braces. Racket uses parentheses. And again, this is in scope for this class because it would be very hard for you to write a program in which you would not have to use this feature. Okay, when I talk about assigning variable, I'm talking about an ordinary scalar variable. And you have prefixes like you have a $sign for a lot of languages to indicate a scalar variable, and you got to know when to use the $sign and when don't. For example, in Bash, you don't use the $sign when you assign it, but you do afterwards because it actually means the content of this memory location. Okay, output is in scope for this class because just about all the programs require you to output something to the screen. Similar thing for input. Okay, Boolean, you want to know what true and what false means in that particular language. Like some of them have a $sign true, $sign false. Some of them just have keywords, and some of them have symbols. Now, I say when something is considered true or false because in some languages, anything that is not zero or null is considered true. Okay, the ternary operator is basically an immediate if. This is an inline if, and the way you would use this is if you have a reply to the user where you say yes, that is the answer, or no, that is not the answer. You can do that as immediate if based on your true and false values, and it's more user readable to them. Not all languages have a ternary operator. Sometimes it's indistinguishable from the more regular if statement. Okay, string interpolation and the expression evaluation. Back when I first started, if you wanted to put a string together and you had a variable, you had to put the string plus the variable plus the rest of the string. You had to do what we call concatenation. Some of the modern languages, you can just put the variable name in there and it automatically fills it in for you. That's kind of neat. There are also some languages where you can put an expression in and it will evaluate the expression and stick it in the string. That's kind of nice too. Okay, quoting rules, I'm mainly talking about single quotes versus double quotes. Double quotes tend to be the type where you can actually put in string interpolation and expression evaluations. Single quotes tend to be a verbatim quote. Now some languages, as you've seen, allow text delimiters such as slash. I think Bash allowed that, so when we did the split, or maybe that was Perl. I'm forgetting at this point. We've had a lot of languages. Okay, regec is a regular expression. A regular expression is kind of like an offset Phillips screwdriver. You don't need it pretty often. When you need it, there's nothing like it. I have to review the formats each time, and there are ways you can actually go online and you can check the formats to make sure they work. Okay, now what happens in the lab is I will generally assign you to use a regular expression. If I don't assign you a regular expression in the lab, then I'm not considering it to be in scope for that particular language. Okay, read and write in the text file. You look at opening and closing the files, and there again, as far as scope in this class, if you have a lab on it that has it, I will hold you responsible for it. Okay, subprograms are the various ways of grouping code together, and they're very language dependent. Some of them call all of them functions. Some say that, well, they have functions and procedures, and the functions, if it returns a value, procedures, it doesn't. That's the SQL version, by the way. You have the old term which called them all subprograms. Now you have methods. Methods are not really considered a subprogram because they'd be considered part of a class definition. Okay, and this is something that you use as necessary. Okay, you got some other structures. You got decision structure, your if then else statement. You got case statement where you have multiple decisions based on the same variable. The same thing for the switch. Okay, iteration, you have for loops. For I equals 1 to 10, do this. If you have a container object that has other objects in there, you'll say for each of those sub-objects, do something. And you have the do while and do until. And you also have while loops. The important thing to understand is, does the loop execute the first time if the exit criterion is satisfied? Okay, complex data structures, you've seen some of these before, and generally if I assign you a complex data structure such as a hash or a class in the lab, I will hold you responsible for it. Otherwise I probably will not, or at least I warn you that you didn't cover that in class. Okay, you need to know what types are available in each of the languages. Some have some have others. Some have the same thing, but they call it different things just to make it entertaining. Okay, connectivity. Each language has its way to connect to databases and each way to connect to other hosts. The good news for you is that is out of scope for this course. I just wanted you to know that it exists in case you ever run across it. Okay, the gotchas and quirks are the useful little things for that particular language that is useful to know. For example, some languages have different operators for assignment as opposed to checking for equality. So if you use the equal instead of the double equals in a conditional, it will actually assign the variable and give you some really strange results. PowerShell has a built-in pipeline, and it's very confusing because you're saying, why am I getting all of this output that I didn't ask for? And there's ways to handle that. In Bash, you'll find out that the variables, when you declare a variable, you set it equal to something. Do not put a space around equals, or else it will go off into the ether and it'll lose itself. Okay, this is a brief overview of my way of learning a new language, which I call the Just Deep Enough methodology. I hope this helps. Thank you and take care.